Hi, Mayor Lou Manzo here with you again, and I hope that you and your family are doing well now, just about 5 months into this coronavirus episode that we're all dealing with. I want to take a second before we get to today's topic and just personally thank you all for the overwhelming response, actually, that I've received to these email updates that I've been writing since mid-March. It's really been incredible. Some are very direct. Obviously, some are expressing the expected frustrations that I know we all have. Some are very heartfelt, heartwarming, some are heartbreaking. And all of that has helped guide me and our team in some of the ways in which we've attempted to stay in contact with you and communicate everything that we've been communicating to you as far as resources available and certainly updates on what the whole medical aspect of this virus impact has been. So on behalf of Deputy Mayor Don Heim and committee members Julie DeLaurentis, John Williams, and Adam Wingate, they want to say thank you. We're very proud to be members of a community that is so willing to engage with our efforts to communicate with you. And so keep that up. We will continue that process going forward until we see the end of this virus episode. It's mid-August now. We're communicating once or twice a week now. We'll do some more of these video chats going forward just to stay connected. And again, keep the messages and emails coming. On that front of communication, today's topic is really meant to focus on something that is top of mind and in the news, which has to do with our school system and school districts and the reopening of schools in September, which has been all over the news recently. Even if you don't have kids in the school system, like I no longer have, you certainly are interested in what's happening and want to know what's going on. So in that interest today, we are bringing on one of the individuals that obviously has a big part in that. Welcome, Dr. Missy Peretti, the superintendent of Harrison Township Elementary School District. Welcome, Missy. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. I think that most people know that you live in town with your husband, Michael, and raising two beautiful daughters here in town, and they also go to the public school district. But let me start by just saying, how are things on the home front?
This has been challenging for us, just like it is challenging for all parents. I have two children, as you mentioned. One is moving into 6th grade, which obviously is her last year in Harrison before she proudly moves on to Clearview. And I know she has high hopes for her 6th grade year, as all students do. And I have a younger one that's moving into kindergarten. So this will really be her first public school experience, which is very different from what any of us have experienced, whether it be professionally or personally or both. So we've been doing a lot of talking about what September might look like. And I can say specifically for my older daughter, she's very anxious to get back with her teachers who she loves and her friends on a regular basis. So this has been frustrating for her. She's just old enough to understand that we are responding as best we can as a school district to plan for September, but she's cautiously optimistic moving forward and very anxious, I know, like many of our other children are in the district.
So it's beneficial, probably, sitting in the seat that you sit, to obviously be raising kids in the district and dealing with it firsthand, which I think most educators are. So let's get to the details of what you're dealing with. If we go back to the beginning, as far as the expectation of what was going to happen in September, on June 26th, the governor announced that schools would reopen to in-classroom education in September. He said and stated at that moment that there would be guidelines put out, and over the next week or so, I think it was, they put out guidelines. They have adjusted in these weeks since, but to start the conversation, based on those guidelines, how did your team and the Harrison School District, utilize those guidelines to create the plan that you now ended up with?
Right. That's exactly the progression. You and I sat together with our administrative team here in Harrison on the 26th. We all anxiously were awaiting that announcement of whether or not we would get our children back in person in September. I think that I speak for many of the staff and staff that were here that day. We were hopeful that we would have guidelines that would allow us to open safely. And that night, that Friday evening on the 26th, very lengthy guidelines, very detailed guidelines that I'm certain took a tremendous amount of time to put together from the governor's office were released. Our team here in Harrison took that weekend to digest those guidelines, and we started running with them on Monday when we got into the office. We spoke throughout the weekend pretty frequently. When we got into the office, we all had the mindset that we were going to take those guidelines, and the first place we were going to start from a planning perspective was to see if we could get our student body in full time, 5 days a week, for as much normalcy as possible. Would we be able to do that in our current setting with the guidelines that we had been given? And we spent a couple of days, full days, working on that plan. As we really digested that plan and we spoke with other school districts, my principal spoke with other principals from their perspective. Our chief academic officer, Mrs. Heenan, spoke with other curriculum representatives from other districts, and I certainly met frequently over those first couple of days with other superintendents. And it became pretty evident quickly that bringing the full population of over 1,300 students in at one time for a full day was going to be difficult. Certainly keeping in mind that safety was of the utmost importance and our first concern. So after that, we began to develop and discuss additional options for how we can educate the students in person. And we had a number of options, most of which were all also being considered by other districts. And each district in our county, in our state, and really in our country at this time have a different set of challenges that they need to work with in order to develop a schedule. So we really focused on Harrison and kind of digested the ideas that were being shared with us and that we had on our own from other professionals and the resources from the Department of Education that were providing as much support as possible at that time. We put a parent survey out, took parents' responses back. The parent survey results were that the overwhelming majority of our parents preferred our students to be back 5 days, full days, if possible. So although we are not able to manage that with the current guidelines and the current situation, keeping public health in mind, we know that that's the goal for this community as quickly as possible. So again, although we were not able to immediately respond to what the survey results told us, we know what the priority is. So we know where we're going as quickly as we can safely. So from that survey, the second choice of our parents was for students to have teacher contact 5 days a week on an amended schedule. So what we developed from that point on is an AM PM schedule very similar to the one that we experienced as a community for years with AM and PM kindergarten. And our population will be split. Last names A through L will be in the morning session, and last names M through Z will be in the PM session, and that will be kindergarten through 6th grade. All students who live in the same household, siblings, family members will be scheduled together. And busing will be done together. So from a personal standpoint, you mentioned my daughters are in 6th grade and kindergarten. They will be getting on the bus together in September, it looks like, as long as there's no major changes moving forward. So that's a very unique experience for the district. So the students will be dropped off at Pleasant Valley first, and then HTS students will be dropped off, and then PBS students will be picked up after the session, and then HTS students, and they will be transported home, both AM and PM students. So we've been working since June 26th to develop that plan. Obviously, we all know, keeping up with the news, that there's been a number of updates to that, as you mentioned, one of which was a direction to the districts that we must provide an all virtual option to our families. So that was a major change in the plan that we were developing, mainly because we have to provide that opportunity for students and ensure that we have the staff members that are available to teach our students virtually. So we incorporated that into our plan as quickly as we could. And then the governor really encouraged us to ensure, as superintendents across the state, that all of our students had access to technology should they need it or choose the virtual option. And after that, a question that I was getting from a number of parents daily was regarding masks being required for the full school day or the full time or session that the students are in school. So the final announcement prior to yesterday's was that all students will be required to wear masks in school. There will be medical exemptions, but the vast majority of all students and staff will be masked with a face covering for the full time that they are here. And then the final change, most recent change, came yesterday when the governor did give all of the 538 school districts the opportunity or the option to close completely for in-person instruction and instruct the students completely virtually, which was not an option when he originally put out the guidelines on the 26th. We were directed that we must have an in-person portion of our plan. And at this time, beginning yesterday, that is no longer a part of his guidelines. And it is possible for districts to state their position as to why they can't instruct the students in person, but it is an option for them to go fully virtual in September.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, since we've been in contact, fairly consistently,
yes,
over the summer, how hard you're working at this, and how the little forks in the road that have occurred have made it more challenging. And I think that the mindset, this is an opinion, I think that the mindset of having each district from the beginning, the governor's office had the mindset that each district should tailor their plan to their community, which makes perfect sense because it's going to vary from one community to the other. So, what I'm hearing you say, and what I know you've done, is that initially you immediately connected with the community through these surveys, and you got feedback, and like you would imagine, it wasn't 100% anything.
Nope.
There's going to be people that would prefer this, people that would prefer that, and there's the majority that rules and priorities and so forth. So you had that at least as your, sounding board to know really what the community wants. And so that was right from the beginning, which obviously makes this plan be tailored specifically to what our community prefers in general. Now, with the little forks in the road, and you've talked about it obviously so far, but I just want to ask you a little bit, drill down a little bit. As this plan has evolved, and it's evolved a little bit, as you said, and beyond the community input, who else has been involved with you in formulating this plan?
Well, the community's input has been the community stakeholders, the parents that are going to be directly affected, the families that are going to be directly affected by these decisions, have been involved in this process in a couple of different ways. So obviously I mentioned the survey, but moving past the survey, after those guidelines were originally digested by the school staff, we had a number of committee meetings in developing this overall plan. And those committee meetings were obviously virtual meetings, so they allowed for as many participants who wanted to be a part of those discussions. And they were difficult discussions. We had a committee on general health. We had a committee specifically on social distancing. We had committees on transportation and food service and facilities and maintenance and curriculum. These committees met over probably close to 10 hours overall in just a couple of days because we needed to turn around the plan fairly quickly. So the Board of Education got our recommendation through me and could act on that in our July board meeting. So we had to go ahead to really start planning. So those committee meetings, again, were sometimes difficult conversations, but I can tell you that the only thing that was difficult about it was this is an issue that none of us, educational professionals, medical professionals, parents in general, none of us had really faced these questions and kind of been at a point where we must answer them in order to plan in a fairly quick timeline. These guidelines were released on June 26th, and typically by then, we are very deep into class list development by then. We're communicating with parents and we're talking about supplemental services and who needs specifics in their overall school schedule. And those typical responsibilities kind of had to stop because we were working not just as an administrative team, which is often the case, although we have a number of any of our teachers who we would need to bring into that process. They've always been more than available because it's all of our goal, regardless of what position we play on this team here in the school district, it's all of our goal to have a successful opening in September every year. This year's no different, but our focus really needed to shift. And we needed to figure out as a community how to kind of get on the same page. And what we all agreed to, without exception, is the first priority here is the health and safety of the children, the health and safety of our staff who love these children and do every year, and the health and safety of anybody who's visiting. So that was number one, and we all have that in common. Certainly there's a lot of different viewpoints on the different schedules that we were looking at. And quite honestly, there's really no great way to say it, but all of them are kind of inconvenient. But, you know, it's very out of the norm. So we kind of had to pick the one from our perspective, and the perspective of the community was we're educators. So what schedule is going to provide the best, most consistent education for this developmental age safely? And when we're talking about kindergartners, first graders, second graders, all the way up to sixth grade, it is really the overall philosophy of all of us that they really need that teacher interaction on a daily basis. And we are providing that and planning to provide that, whether our families choose the in-person hybrid model, so they're sitting with a teacher in the same classroom, socially distanced, or they choose the virtual model. They're going to have their teacher just like you and I are having this conversation for those core subjects. We really are attempting to mirror those programs as much as possible, keeping in mind that we want that teaching, that live teaching each day of the week, 5 days a week. So we're moving forward.
So how much description can you give me or give us on what a typical day is going to look like for a student? Obviously, it's going to vary from kindergarten to sixth grade, but what is going to be a typical day as far as sessions and breakdown and so forth?
Sure. So I will start with any student whose family together has chosen, and the final decision for that is by August 15th, any family who wishes to choose the virtual option only for their students have to fill out an application, basically, that we know that that's the choice that that family is making. Anyone who's choosing the in-person or hybrid model will be put in there automatically. So that choice only needs to be communicated if it's the virtual choice. Otherwise, we assume you're choosing in-person or hybrid. So once that decision's made, looking at a student whose family chose the in-person or hybrid model, again, depending on your last name, you're going to either be in the AM or the PM. The bus, as I mentioned, with my daughters as an example, will be transporting to both buildings. And then students will be instructed in reading and mathematics during their in-person time with their teacher. And some of the real specifics that make this year really unique, outside of the very obvious ones that make this year unique, is that students will not be moving through the building nearly as much as they are on a typical basis. They will be in their cohort, which should be anywhere from 7 or 8 students up to about 10 students. They'll be in their cohorts and they will stay there. As the students get a little older and different teachers are teaching different subject areas, the teachers, at this point, we are planning for the teachers to actually switch classrooms. So the students are really going to enter their classroom, the vast majority of our population. There are a few examples based upon the student's educational plan, but the vast majority of our population is going to walk into the building, walk into their classroom, be socially distanced within the classroom because it's really only half the population, and they will be instructed live in reading and mathematics. Then on the half of the day that they're not live, they will be instructed synchronously with social studies, science, and their special areas. Not every day of the 6-day cycle, but some combination. So that will still be a live instruction, but not in person. And then for those students who choose virtual, exactly the way I just described, but instead of going into the building for reading and mathematics, they will be having reading and mathematics through live instruction from their home. And then their social studies, science, and special area instructions will be exactly the same as those kids who choose the hybrid model. So really the programs are very mirrored, with the exception of just coming into the building and physically being here. They will still have that instruction with a live teacher. From a teacher's perspective, at this point, if you are teaching live students, you are teaching completely live students. The students who choose the virtual model will have a completely virtual cohort. So there's going to be no time where a teacher is going to be teaching live students in the regular classroom. We'll be teaching live students and streaming into someone's home. So the virtual students will have their own teacher, the live students will have their own teacher, so that those two programs or experiences will remain consistent for those students.
Got it. Well, sounds like you have it down. I mean, after all of this, and assuming there's not going to be any other changes, which at this point, you know, unless it's something unforeseen, you're now, you know, a few weeks away from the first day of school. So hopefully everything stays, you know, even keeled between now and then. And so anything else that you think you want to add that you feel parents might want to know about before we wrap it up?
Well, I think from a timely experience or perspective, yesterday the governor announced, as I said, that schools have the option of going completely virtually. So I have gotten a number of questions since his announcement yesterday that I certainly will respond to, but just here for everyone's purposes, it is the intention of the Harrison Township School District to forge ahead with the plan that we have,
right,
short of any additional information coming in. But it is always important for all of us as parents, myself included, for my own daughters, to really remember to be patient, because we are getting updated information fairly constantly. An example would be when we got notified that the students would all be expected to wear masks, and that decision would be mandatory. I learned that, I believe it was last Monday, when the governor put that out on social media. So I learned that the same time that our parents did. So oftentimes we're getting information that our government is making based on public health numbers, and different information that he is getting. And we're being notified as superintendents oftentimes very close to the same time as the community is being notified. So that has been difficult. So if I could add one thing, it would be, if any changes occur between now and September, chances are it's going to be communicating with all of us at one time. And every change that happens may seem fairly minor if you don't happen to be in this field right now, but very few of them are minor. Oftentimes when a decision is announced, or it is important enough for our governor to make a statement, whether it be on social media or in person, if it's important enough, it may seem small, but it is certainly affecting our plans pretty significantly. So our community has been so patient and so supportive, and on behalf of our entire staff, as usual, as always, we cannot thank you enough, all of our community enough, for the support, because these are difficult times, but we are dedicated to have a successful opening just like we always have.
Yeah. And just since you've referenced it a few times and people are watching us, they're going to be seeing this on Friday, August 14th. We're recording it on Thursday the 13th. So yesterday was the 12th, and the governor's announcement that became official, as far as, you know, the all virtual option and the control that remains with the local school district. So I just want to, on behalf of the community, I mean, I know I do speak for them when I say to you that we are so thankful that you and your team, you know, the school board, are so committed to the education of our children. You know, I can speak to it directly, having had 3 daughters come through the whole system, and now we're flourishing in the world with great careers and did wonderful at college. That's how old I am now. They're all out of college. And that's part of the reason that this community is what it is the basis of the educational system that you have a big hand in. So I want to thank you for everything you've done in these extraordinary times to make it be the best version that it could be, because there is no such thing as perfection in these crazy, crazy times. So thank you, Dr. Peretti. Thank you, and pass that on to the rest of your staff. And
I will.
look forward to we'll look forward to seeing you in September.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Okay. Have a great weekend. See you.
You too.